Hello everyone, I'm Mike Gibson and you're watching the programme Capital Ideas Life. If Rome is associated with St. Peter's, Istanbul with Hagia Sophia, then Moscow is associated with the Cathedral of Christ the Saviour. In this programme, we will tell you the amazing story of its construction, destruction and restoration. We will visit those corners tourists never go and let you know the secrets of this holy place. In today's episode, the main cathedral of the Russian Orthodox Church. An amazing 200-year-long story.
How could they destroy such beauty?
The full official name of the Cathedral of Christ the Saviour is the Cathedral Church of the Nativity of Jesus. It was on the 25th of December 1812, Christmas Day, that the Russian Emperor Alexander I announced victory over Napoleon. He then promised to build a church in the name of Christ the Saviour as a sign of gratitude to God. This was made both for saving the fatherland from the death that threatened it and in the eternal memory of the people's perseverance in the war. However, the construction of this church, which would become a symbol of courage and military glory, only began 27 years later in 1839. The younger brother of Alexander I, Emperor Nicholas I, personally chose the site for the construction of the church. He chose Moscow's Volkhonka Street, not far from the Kremlin. The Cathedral of Christ the Saviour was only completed and consecrated on the 26th of May, 1883. This was during the reign of Alexander III. The cathedral was an important, one might say a personal, matter for all Russian emperors who reigned during its construction. The Cathedral of Christ the Saviour is a monument dedicated to the Patriotic War of 1812 in honour of the victory of Russia over Napoleon. There are memorial plaques near the entrance with the names of battles, unit commanders, the fallen and decorated officers. This cathedral was not only a reminder of the heroic deeds of the Russian people who defeated Napoleon, it also served as a venue for the most important events held by the Russian Orthodox Church. Unfortunately, however, it only existed for 48 years. In 1931, the Bolsheviks blew it up. In its place, they built the USSR's largest outdoor swimming pool, and it was only at the end of the 20th century that the Cathedral of Christ the Saviour was built anew. It's interesting that the first cathedral took 44 years to build, but the new cathedral took only a little more than 5 years. The idea to restore the church was born shortly before the breakup of the Soviet Union. This restoration provided a powerful symbol of Russia's historic transformations.
A social movement appeared in support of this idea to recreate the cathedral. In the 1990s, a community of the Cathedral of Christ the Saviour was established. It even launched a fundraising campaign. The country's leadership made a political decision. This was to build the Cathedral of Christ the Saviour on its former site, to recreate the cathedral in its original form. The fund for financial support to restore the Cathedral of Christ the Saviour was set up to raise funds for the construction.
Like the former church, the new cathedral was not built solely with public funds, but also with donations. Hundreds of thousands of people and companies in Russia, as well as other countries, made donations for the cathedral's restoration. Among them was the President of Kazakhstan, Nursultan Nazarbayev, and the President of Argentina, Carlos Menem. A year after construction began, the first service was held in the unfinished building.
I would like to congratulate you on the first patronal feast held in this holy church. Just a few years ago, it was hard to imagine that in our difficult times, this desecrated shrine of Russia would again stand here in a deep pit in place of a swimming pool.
On the 7th of January 2000, Orthodox Christmas, the newly built Cathedral of Christ the Saviour opened its doors to parishioners. The Patriarch of Moscow and all Russia, Alexei, served the first solemn Christmas liturgy here. On the 19th of January 2000, the Cathedral of Christ the Saviour was consecrated. That was the beginning of the cathedral's new history. It then became the symbol of Russia's spiritual rebirth.
Among the goals of that fund was to convince people that, after all, the cathedral was one of the national symbols. Russia's rebirth had to begin with certain moves, including symbolic ones. A return to its spiritual origins, for example, to the Russian Orthodox Church.
The restored cathedral became the largest of the Russian Orthodox Church. It can fit 10,000 people simultaneously. The church stands at a height of 103 meters, and it has a total area of more than 80,000 square meters. Historians, architects, and painters have done a truly titanic job in recreating the church in its entirety. Its external and internal decoration, icons, wall murals, bas reliefs, and carved chandeliers. According to art historians, the new cathedral is no different from the former destroyed church, with the exception of a few details. Every year, more than 2 million people visit the Cathedral of Christ the Saviour. This is one of the capital's main tourist attractions. The walls and domes of the cathedral were hand-painted by 200 artists. Just imagine that the total area of the murals is 22,000 square meters, and this was all painted in less than a year. In the 19th century, the best Russian artists worked on the church interior decoration: Surikov, Vereshchagin, Semiradsky. The artist, Ivan Kramskoy, painted the face of God on the 27-meter-high dome. In the new cathedral, his work was accurately repeated by Yevgeny Maximov, a professor of painting.
Everybody looks up, usually. I often give guided tours for visitors here. And when they enter the cathedral and they see the dome, their breath is taken away. And the next thing they say is, how could they destroy such beauty?
Yes. The interior of the Cathedral of Christ the Saviour is made up of 3 parts. 2 parts were consecrated in honor of St. Nicholas the Miracle Maker and the Holy Prince Alexander Nevsky. The central part was built in honor of the Nativity of Jesus. It has an unusual 27-meter-tall, 8-sided altar made of white carved marble. Why did this cathedral become a symbol of Russia?
The Cathedral of Christ the Saviour was built as a sign of gratitude to divine providence for saving Russia from Napoleon. Back then, it was the largest temple of the Russian Orthodox Church and also of the Orthodox Church at large. It represents military victory and Russia's liberation from the enemy. The greatness of the cathedral signifies gratitude toward God for saving the country from doom. All of this came together in this place, in this cathedral.
The Cathedral of Christ the Saviour is a national treasure of Russia. It's a special historic place where the most important events in the Russian Empire were held. The 300th anniversary of the House of Romanov and the 100th anniversary of the victory over Napoleon were commemorated here. On the 15th of August 1917, after a 200-year-long break, the All-Russian Local Religious Council took place. It restored the Patriarchy to the Russian Church. Orthodox Russia found its Patriarch again. Holy Patriarch Tikhon was elected Russia's Patriarch. He was later canonized. After its restoration, the Cathedral of Christ the Saviour became the center of Russia's spiritual life. It stores the most important and sacred Christian relics. These are not only symbols of faith, but also of the country's great history. Believers from across Russia came to the cathedral to worship the holy relics of Metropolitan Philaret, St. John Chrysostom, and the great princes Vladimir and Alexander Nevsky. The cathedral's main sacred relics are kept in the altar, where only clergymen can enter. However, an exception was made for our film crew. With Father Mikhail's blessing, we can show you the interior decoration inside the cathedral's main iconostasis.
Here we are. We are at the altar of the Cathedral of Christ the Saviour. You can see 6 paintings. These are original works by Vereshchagin, a Russian artist.
So these are Stations of the Cross. I don't know how to translate them into Russian.
You mean the Stations of the Cross, yes.
Is there a connection between them?
Not quite. But the plot is about the agony in the garden, before Jesus' sufferings, and everything ends with the descent from the cross. It's about that period. It's the trial before Pilate, when he said, "Behold the man." It depicts the carrying of the cross, the crucifixion, the descent from the cross, and the burial. And this is an authentic armchair that has been preserved from the original cathedral. This is a piece of the robe of the Lord, and this is one of the nails that was used to hammer Jesus to the cross. And there we keep the sacred robe of the Most Holy Mother.
Another difference between the original and the restored cathedral is that the latter has a large supporting platform called a stylobate. After the demolition of the old cathedral, the Bolsheviks wanted to construct a huge building, the Palace of the Unions. But because of the Great Patriotic War, works were suspended. Eventually, in the 1950s, in place of the huge pit with the unfinished foundation, the Moskva swimming pool was built. It was the largest swimming pool in the USSR and one of the largest swimming pools in the world.
The former Cathedral of Christ the Saviour stood on a hill. The hill was destroyed when the construction of the Palace of the Unions was attempted, and later when the swimming pool was built. So the architects who recreated this cathedral faced the task of restoring the original level, the original height relative to the architectural environment. It was necessary to refill the hill or to use the newly appeared areas in some useful way. So it was decided to create the so-called stylobate part.
Within the stylobate, another temple was built, the Church of the Transfiguration. It was consecrated in honor of the Alexeyevsky nunnery that was once situated on this site. Also situated here is the Hall of the Church Councils, refectories, and the Patriarch Museum of Church Art. While there are queues at the Pushkin Museum and the Tretyakov Gallery, I recommend that you come to this place, the Patriarch Museum of Church Art. Here, there is a unique collection of icons. His Holiness Patriarch Kirill of Moscow and all Russia himself helped with the creation of this museum. Many of its icons are from his personal collection. Church artworks of the last 2 millennia are arranged here in chronological order. We see works by the old masters of the Byzantine, Cretan, and Moscow schools, as well as by the famous Russian artists Ivanov and Nestorov. A jewel in the crown is the triptych by Victor Kuznetsov. It was created specially for the 1899 Paris exhibition.
We have the best collections of works by the Italo-Cretan school. Neither the Hermitage nor the Pushkin Museum have such a collection.
The Patriarch Museum of Church Art also has a separate exposition that explains the history of the construction and demolition of the cathedral. It has unique exhibits, such as authentic artifacts of the former destroyed cathedral. For example, here you can see the miraculous surviving fragments of the Last Supper, a fresco by Henryk Simaredzki.
Here's another authentic exhibit. It's the priestly vestment. A priest was wearing this ceremonial robe during the consecration of the cathedral in 1883. So this is also an authentic item. Another authentic piece is a record of the choir of the Cathedral of Christ the Saviour that dates to the early 20th century.
The Bolsheviks used the marble of the demolished cathedral for the facing of several Moscow metro stations. Today, the fragments of this marble are also kept at the museum, and this 50-kilogram bell, together with its elder brothers, used to summon the faithful to services more than 100 years ago. That's the sound of the 19th century. And this sound comes from the 21st century. The sounds of the new bells of the Cathedral of Christ the Saviour are heard throughout the centre of Moscow. 20 minutes before the service, the Annunciation bell rings. 10 minutes later, the triple peal, which is the ringing of several small bells, joins in. At normal times, the entrance to the belfry is closed both for tourists and parishioners alike. Our crew had a unique opportunity to not only film the cathedral's bell ringing, but also to participate in the creation of these sounds. During the opening hours of the cathedral, anyone can get to its observation platform. You can enjoy one of the best views of Moscow from this place. Look at this magnificent view. From up here we can see all of the capital, the Moscow River, the Kremlin, and Park Zaryadya. The day that this program was filmed coincided with the feast of the deposition of the Lord's robe. This was held in the cathedral. In the 17th century, the Persian Shah Abbas gave as a present a piece of the robe of Jesus Christ to His Holiness Patriarch Philaret. On the 23rd of July, 1625, the robe was solemnly placed in the tabernacle that houses sacred relics in the Assumption Cathedral. This is in the Moscow Kremlin. In the USSR, this sacred relic was kept at the Kremlin Museum. It was only in 2007 that it was given to the cathedral. The minister of the Cathedral of Christ the Saviour is Patriarch Kirill of Moscow and all Russia. He personally conducts church services here on the days of the main Orthodox feasts, Christmas and Easter.
Today, we are at the recreated Cathedral of Christ the Saviour. Many thousands of temples have been built, and thousands of other churches are in the process of construction. But most importantly, our people are turning to faith. We are beginning to understand that there are good reasons for the tragic chapters in our country's history. We see divine providence, the presence of God in human history. This means that God gives us assistance so that we grow stronger in our faith.
The Patriarch also holds church services in the temple below, in the Church of the Transfiguration. This happens twice a year, on the Apple Feast of the Saviour Day and on the Epiphany Day. The only icon that miraculously survived the demolition of the former cathedral is kept here in the church, the Transfiguration. It is the image of Edessa by the artist Sorokin. Nearby the church, the Transfiguration, there's the Hall of Church Councils. Taking place in this large hall that has a capacity of 1,300 people are the most important meetings of the Russian Orthodox Church. For example, local religious councils have elected the Patriarch here and made decisions on canonizing saints. In addition, it was here that the decision was made to restore communication with the Russian Orthodox Church abroad. With the blessing of His Holiness Patriarch Kirill, the hall also serves as a venue for secular events such as annual Christmas tree parties and concerts. The only part of the Moscow swimming pool that's still remaining is behind me. I'm going to show you what we can find there now. After the restoration of the Cathedral of Christ the Saviour, a gallery was opened here called the Art Center Moscow. It showcases works from private collections that have never been shown to the public.
In fact, this is an educational and cultural project. It's not only about paintings, it's also about music. For example, we hold orchestral concerts. This helps visitors understand paintings through music. And of course, we have lectures on art and art history. Our gallery is on the premises of the cathedral, and this is very important because culture and spirituality should go hand in hand.
Gallery visitors are welcomed by the portrait of Emperor Alexander I, the founder of the Cathedral of Christ the Saviour. The exhibition also has portraits of other members of the royal family, as well as their personal belongings. The Art Center Moscow showcases works by well-known Russian artists: Aivazoffsky, Levitan, Savrasov, Shishkin. It also exhibits classical works of European art, paintings by Flemish and Italian Renaissance artists. After the demolition of the former cathedral, priceless relics were lost forever. However, some of them were saved by a miracle and are still kept in the new cathedral. This became possible thanks to the Muscovites who, in risking their lives, came to the destroyed cathedral, picked up the items that could still be saved, kept them for 70 years, and then gave them back to the newly restored Cathedral of Christ the Saviour.
The idea of restoring the Cathedral of Christ the Saviour was to show that the spirituality of the Russian people didn't disappear. It wasn't lost. So the restoration of the Cathedral of Christ the Saviour demonstrated that there are many people who retain the memory of the former Cathedral of Christ the Saviour. Perhaps in the 50s and 60s, it was difficult to even think about it. It was hard to imagine that this could be possible. However, in the 1990s, when the situation was gradually changing, people began to hope that this would be realistic. And as you can see, we made it happen.
The Cathedral of Christ the Saviour did not only become a symbol of Russia's rebirth, it also gave impetus for the restoration of demolished churches and the construction of new cathedrals across Russia and abroad. Over the past 30 years, more than 30,000 Orthodox churches and cathedrals have been constructed or rebuilt from the ruins. This is a very special year. It's the 20th anniversary of the consecration of Christ the Saviour Cathedral, a symbol of Russia and the Orthodox Church. It's also a symbol of a nation that kept the spirit of the old cathedral, its relics, and rebuilt it again. I'm Mike Gibson. You're watching the program Capital Ideas Life. See you in a week.